Welcome to the Private Practice Lab, the space where great therapists become great entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Asia, and every episode will explore the formulas, experiments, and discoveries that help you run your practice like a pro without burning out. This show was created for therapists like you. Whether you're dreaming of launching your first private practice, building one part-time while you're juggling other roles, or figuring out how to scale what you've built into something bigger, if you've ever wished for a roadmap tailored to the therapy world and not just generic business advice, you're in the right place. In this first episode, I'm sharing the story behind the Private Practice Lab, how I went from therapist to practice owner to consultant, the gaps I've noticed in support for therapists building their businesses, and why I believe creating and growing a private practice is ultimately one big experiment. So grab your metaphorical lab coat. Today, we're stepping into the lab to explore the origin story behind the podcast and how it can help you build a thriving, sustainable practice on your own terms. Once again, my name is Asia Rodriguez. I'm a licensed therapist in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and Puerto Rico. I've been in practice since 2017, and like many of you, my journey into private practice started as a dream and a side hustle. My early years as a clinician were spent exploring a wide range of settings, which gave me a deep and well-rounded perspective on the mental health field. I interned at a group private practice and a nonprofit. I worked in crisis intervention, hospitals, school-based programs, community-based organizations. I spent time in methadone clinics and federally qualified health centers and employee assistance programs. Each of these roles taught me something valuable about systems, needs, and the realities of the profession, but I still hadn't quite found my footing. One of the most pivotal moments in my career came when I was hired for a position that I really thought was the perfect fit. It was my dream job. It was a perfect setup, only to be let go just 8 days after starting because the organization as a whole was shutting down. That experience was a turning point for me. It forced me to think critically about my future and ask myself if I wanted to continue relying on jobs that could literally disappear overnight. I'd already seen how unstable traditional roles could be. Some of them didn't pay on time. Others required me to chase down supervisors just to get a paycheck or to get them to sign off on my hours. And many left me feeling exhausted and burned out before I even truly got my feet wet in the field. That's when I started exploring alternative ways to earn income, including creating my own source of income. What's interesting is that I always knew I wanted to have a private practice. That was a part of the vision for my career from the very beginning. But in my mind, it was something I would do much later in life. So maybe when I was near retirement and I was ready to slow it down a little bit, I imagined it as a quiet, one day a week kind of thing where I could see clients on my own terms after decades in the field. I never really expected that I would be launching a practice so early in my career, but the circumstances I faced and the lessons I learned along the way really pushed me to take that leap much sooner than I launched my private practice part-time in 2019 while I was still working full-time in other clinical roles. And by 2022, I had transitioned into full-time private practice. I'd evolved from a solo practice into a small group with an admin team, clinical supervisor, and 3 other clinicians. Along the way, I also worked at a mental health tech company that prioritized client experiences, software optimization, automations, and using technology to streamline operations. That experience really shaped how I run my practice today, intentionally building systems and workflows that allow the clinical work to thrive without getting buried under all the admin and billing chaos. All of those experiences, the instability, the burnout, the constant search for something more sustainable, is what really pushed me to rethink what a career in this field could really look like for me in the long term. And as I started building my own practice, I really realized something important. Therapists aren't lacking passion or clinical skill. We have tons of that. We're often lacking the business guidance and infrastructure that make private practice possible and sustainable. I kept noticing the same gaps over and over again, both in my own journey and in conversations with other clinicians. And that realization became the spark for what would eventually grow into this podcast. As I was building my own private practice and later consulting with other therapists who were trying to do the same, I started to notice some very real and consistent gaps in the support available to us as clinicians. These gaps weren't just minor oversights. They were fundamental pieces of the puzzle that no one seemed to be addressing in a way that truly met therapists where we were. Here are some of the biggest gaps that I kept seeing. 1, lack of guidance for part-time starts. Most of the books, the boot camps, the trainings that are out there are focused on launching a full-time private practice from day one. But that's just not realistic for many of us. A lot of therapists are trying to build something while still working in other roles. And there's very little guidance on how to start small and scale gradually without burnout or without going broke. 2, limited support for the solo to group transition. I noticed that once therapists reached a certain level of success, there was a huge gap in resources about what comes next. Growing from a solo practice into a group is an entirely different business model with new systems, responsibilities, and leadership skills required. But very few resources really break that down step by step. 3, generic business advice that doesn't really translate to our business type. I've taken entrepreneurship courses, completed a certificate in women's entrepreneurship from Cornell University. I joined local chambers of commerce and attended countless business trainings. And while they were all valuable, most of the information wasn't designed for therapist entrepreneurs. It didn't take into account our ethical codes, our documentation requirements, or the nuances of working with insurance, all of which completely change how we have to structure and operate our businesses. For example, a lot of traditional business coaching emphasizes getting as many customers as you can as quickly as possible. But in our field, that's not always possible and maybe not always ethical. We can't just pack our caseloads with endless clients without sacrificing the quality of care. Doing that would not only burn us out, but also reduce how often our clients are able to see us, which would affect our treatment outcomes and compromise the therapeutic relationship over time. And without additional clinicians or infrastructure in place, more isn't always better. And that's exactly the kind of nuance that generic business advice misses when it's applied to therapy practices. 4. Foundations overlooked. So many clinicians I work with were launching or relaunching their practices without some of the most essential components in place, like clear policies and procedures, operational systems, or a strong understanding of their finances. Without those foundations, they didn't feel confident about the longevity of their practice, and many hesitated to step out on their own because they didn't trust the structure they built. 5. Operating systems and processes are rarely taught. Even therapists with established practices were struggling with the back end of their businesses. Things like maintaining an admin team or managing an admin team, setting up workflows, handling insurance credentialing and billing, implementing automations to save time. These are crucial skills, but most of us were never taught them in grad school. 6. Missed opportunity for diversifying income. Another gap I saw was that many therapists didn't know how to create additional streams of income within their businesses. Whether it was developing workshops, offering supervision or consultation, creating digital products, or building internship programs, these revenue streams not only stabilize income, but also expand impact. The more I noticed these patterns in my own experience and the clinicians I was consulting with, the clearer it became that we needed something different, something that spoke directly to our world, our work, and the realities of running a therapy practice. And that's why the private practice lab exists, to close these gaps. So here's the truth. Building, maintaining, and expanding a private practice is one big experiment. We spend hours researching, observing how others run their practices, testing new software and policies, analyzing data to see if our marketing is working. We're constantly discovering new things we didn't know before. Some of those experiments are really going to work. Some of them don't. But each one brings us closer to the practice that we envision. And that's where the private practice lab comes in. This isn't about one-size-fits-all answers. It's about giving you the formulas, the step-by-step strategies to work, the blueprints, the foundational structures to build on, and the experiments, the tools to try, test, and tweak so you can create a practice that truly works for you. This season, we're diving deep into all the layers of private practice, from launching part-time to scaling into a group, pricing your services with confidence, creating systems that save your sanity, and really building a brand that stands out. Each episode will feel like a working session inside the lab, so practical, honest, and designed to help you move forward without being overwhelmed. Whether you're just thinking about starting or you're ready to expand, you'll find strategies you can apply right away. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the Private Practice Lab and share it with a therapist friend who's building their practice too. The more of us experimenting, the more discoveries we'll make together. And remember, your practice isn't built overnight. It's built through testing, refining, and growing. I'll see you in the next episode where we'll start laying the blueprint for your practice from the ground up.